Subscribe to our YouTube channel and press the bell icon to get the latest updates.
We've been focusing on Afghanistan for several days, and that focus continues. Because you know what? Afghanistan is not a local thing. It is not, what's happened in Afghanistan is not about Afghans and Afghanistan. It is about global balance of power. Because as we know, we've said this before, that geography has been Afghanistan's curse. That's why it's been the battleground of big powers. So once again, now the Americans are going back defeated and also humiliated in their departure with these missteps during the evacuation. This is bound to change the global balance of power. This will also change the regional balance of power. This will also change the picture for India, and India will also have to make some important decisions. So India, Afghanistan, Pakistan, Central Asian republics, China, America, the Middle East, all these regions will be influenced by what's happened in Afghanistan and with the American withdrawal. So I will try and explain that with some opinion in 10 points. But before I get there, let me also share some good news with you, or maybe acknowledge the good news, because you know the good news. So I'm not really sharing it, but I'm acknowledging the good news. The good news is not just that last Friday India put 1.03 crore vaccines into people's arms. The important thing is that as we speak now, more than 50% of India's adult population has had at least one vaccine. That is a humongous achievement. That means India has administered more vaccines already than all of America, maybe a couple of big European countries together. That is because I'm counting them as 2 vaccines per person, not just one. But total vaccines, India has already administered about 63 crores. In fact, by the time you see it, number would have gone up further. And if you look at what's going to be available in September, this will rise exponentially. So this is very good news that needs to be applauded. So once again, more than 50%, the hump has been crossed. More than 50% of our adult population has at least one shot. Every day, if I look at the data, Ministry of Health and Welfare, which is the first thing I do when I wake up in the morning, the first thing tells me that now the percentage of those getting the second shot as compared to those still getting the first shot is now going up. Say about a month and a half back, it was 10%. Now it is almost 40%. That means people are getting their second shots also. And if you see the picture again, see this story, 16.2 crore vaccines in a month. In August were produced by Serum Institute of India. That was above the estimates. For September, they have already written to Government of India that they will give 20 crore vaccines. Bharat Biotech this month gave about 2.5 crores. But once again, just on the day that India had crossed the 1 crore, on the same day, Mansukh Mandviya, the new health minister, he also released the first batch of Covaxin, that is Bharat Biotech's vaccine manufactured at a plant in Ankleshwar. That plant, read the story on the print by Nikhil Rampal. That plant used to be a plant owned by a foreign company that manufactured rabies vaccines. It was called Chiron Bearing Private Limited. That was going bankrupt and shutting down. 2019, before the COVID pandemic struck, Bharat Biotech had acquired it. That was good sense, but it also tells you the kind of financial muscle that Indian vaccine manufacturers have built up over the years. So they had bought that company. Now within months, they've been able to set up a line and change the production line also from rabies vaccines to COVID vaccines. So this plant will now be producing 20 crore COVID vaccines in a year. So I suspect because this is also started, by September, about 3 to 4 crore vaccines will come from Bharat Biotech, and each month it will go up just as Serum will go up. So once again, I think by the end of this year, by the end of December, almost any Indian adult who's willing to be vaccinated will be vaccinated at least once. That's a humongous achievement, and that is something that everybody was skeptical about. I'd say even I was skeptical about. And I said so when government said that they will administer 60 crore plus vaccines by the end of August. We thought this was just another claim or just another something like a jumla. That is the regular joke. But now it's turned out to be not a jumla because August is not yet ended. The number is 63 crores. Now at an average of nearly a crore a day or 80-90 lakhs a day, we could finish 65 crores jabs by 31st August. That for a country like India with poor facilities, with poverty, bad medical care, bad primary health care is a very, very big achievement. So in September, if 25 crores of these vaccines come, as they will, between Serum and Bharat Biotech, October, November, December, you will expect more coming in. So I would say the second target that the government had given in the Supreme Court, that was the target in June. Earlier they had said 216 vaccine doses by December 31. The second target that they had given to Supreme Court in June, they had anticipated 135 crore vaccines between the months of August and December. Now that 135 crore looked like a stretch at that point because government had also added 30 crore from Johnson & Johnson, 5 from Zydus Cadila, which has just been cleared, but we don't know when it will be available and how many will be available, and Sputnik 5, 10 crores, which is still having problems, particularly with its second dose production in India. But in spite of that, so 30 plus 30 of Johnson & Johnson, that has an indemnity issue, Zydus Cadila 5 and Sputnik 5, that is 10 crores. Sputnik 5 ka 10 crores. So 10 plus 5, 15 and so 45 were taken out. Remaining 90 crores were supposed to be 50 crores from Covishield from Serum Institute and 40 from Johnson & Johnson. Chances are, if Covishield is giving you 20 crores in September, they give you 16 crore plus in August, then you can presume they'll give you 25, 30 crores in months going ahead, and Covaxin will also go up, whether they get up to 40 crore or not. But chances are that between Covaxin and Covishield themselves, India will meet that target of 135 doses between August and December. So once again, congratulations to everybody that has made it happen. And we've been very critical of Modi government in the second wave. I would say on this one, Modi government has got it right. They've proved their critics wrong. So once again, the other thing that we have to acknowledge is about people of India. Why are numbers of COVID cases rising in America so rapidly? Why are they rising in a state like Florida, which is by no means the poorest state of America? They are short of hospital beds, they are nearly short of oxygen. So this is not a question of Schadenfreude. Some TV channels, etc., have also exhibited Schadenfreude, which is unfortunate. But the reason this has happened is that these countries have large populations, large numbers of anti-vaxxers, ideological anti-vaxxers who think vaccine will kill them, right? Vaccine will do horrible things to them. And some of them also come from some religious beliefs, etc. So America has a large number of anti-vaxxers. Countries in Europe also have some. In India, on the other hand, you see almost nobody, the poorest people, every day the allocated vaccines are consumed. This month of August, India would have pushed in about 20 crore vaccines overall in the month. If they were 25, they would have been consumed. Next month will be 25, they will be consumed. The following month will be maybe 30, they will be they'll be consumed. So once again, it's also a pat on our own backs, not my own, but pat on our backs as on the pats of the Indian people's backs, that they don't buy any of this anti-vaxxer nonsense. They still believe in science, they trust the vaccines, they trust the system. So well done. This is a turning point, and if this continues like this, India's economy, life could come back to normal much faster than before. Also, if this pace is maintained over the next couple of months, then unless some frightful new variant comes up, chances are that India is now capable of ducking the third wave. The third wave may still happen. I'm not saying will not happen or it's impossible. Nobody who's sane should say it. Nobody who's not sort of in a high state of spirituality, you know what I mean, should ever say it. But the fact is that a third wave is now not an inevitability. So on that happy note, let me shift to the troublesome story of the month, continuing troublesome story, which is Afghanistan. And what are the 10 points I think that come that arise from it? And I will talk about each one very briefly, because if you ask me, each one would merit a full cut the clutter or a national interest. So I'm giving many stories away. So first of all, what does it do to India? Because after all, that matters most of all to us. So it matters to India in different ways. One, India will be asking the US some hard questions now. And what is that hard question? What is the hardest question? That you want us to fight your enemy, which is China. Or you want us, if not to fight, you want us to balance your enemy, which is China. And what we do with China, we as in India, Japan, Australia cannot do. Those are the other members of the Quad. Also, what China can do to us, it cannot do to Japan, Australia, for different reasons. One, because it does not have contiguous land borders. With India, it has a very long, more than 3,500 kilometer land border and very difficult land borders. So it's a clear and present situation with India. And second, unlike Australia and Japan, America is not bound with India with a security treaty. So America does not guarantee India's security. So the question that India will be asking America now is, and it should ask, and I'm sure it's being done on the quiet, that you want us as a member of your coalition to balance out or to fight or to undermine your arch enemy, which is China. How can you at the same time be friends, or now increasingly friends and increasingly reliant on our arch enemies, which is Pakistan and Taliban, unless the Taliban completely change their conduct or behavior? That is still in the future. So if you are going back again to sort of the pre-2001 situation, which means Afghanistan is back to being the University of Jihad. In fact, you watch my off the cuff with Sadi Mohsen, who's the founder of Tolo News and one of the finest voices on Afghanistan. It will be shown tomorrow, that off the cuff. He says not just the University of Jihad, it could become the Harvard and Cambridge of Jihad combined, Harvard, Oxford and Cambridge. If Afghanistan were to become that again under Taliban rule, whether because the Taliban allow it as they did the last time, or they are not able to control it because the place is much too wild and difficult to govern, then how will the Americans fight that without once again choosing Pakistan as their stalwart ally? So how does this work? That my arch enemy to my western borders is your stalwart ally, and your arch enemy to my northern borders, who's also my adversary, is somebody that you want me fighting, but at the same time you want to do business with my arch enemy to my west. That is not going to work. And I think India will have to draw that line, and some important decisions will have to be made about India's own strategic view and the future. The second point, India will have to figure out how to deal with the Taliban. Is it back to 1996? Perhaps not. And I think I would say that so far government responses have been wise. While there is a lot of social media chatter about Talibanization and Taliban and all that, and some state governments are even filing criminal cases against anybody who says anything halfway not offensive about Taliban, not even flattering. Somebody might even say something flattering that Taliban have changed, they defeated the Americans, etc. So some state governments are filing cases, but the fact is, read the central government's lips. Nobody in the central government has said anything adverse on the Taliban. So that is the next point. So there is an acceptance of today's reality, because unlike 1996, India does not have, once again, an animal metaphor, but you know what that means. India does not have a dog in this race, right? So India does not have somebody that India backs. Today's Panjshiris are too small under Amrullah Saleh and Ahmad Masood. In 1996, there was Ahmad Shah Masood with a large army, charisma, etc., etc. Today there is nothing. And also today's Taliban now have tacit recognition of the rest of the world, particularly the big powers, that's America, Russia, China, and the Arab world, beginning with Qatar and then Turkey, and we'll come to Turkey. So that is the next point. India will have to figure out how to deal with these Taliban unless they do something openly hostile or adversarial in days to come, which frankly, if you ask me, is unlikely, not so soon, but India will have to take a view. That's why India is quiet on the Taliban, and that's a sensible thing to do. Next, Pakistan will have to learn to deal with the new kind of Taliban who want now recognition from the world. Earlier Taliban didn't care. Earlier Taliban just they were just okay with UAE, Saudi Arabia, Pakistan, Iran. They were in a world of their own. But this Taliban cannot remain in a world of their own, and that's not just because, as Parvez Hudbhoy wrote in his article that we republished from Karachi's Dawn yesterday, and I'll share a link with you. Not just because these Taliban leaders have now enjoyed the comforts of the 7-star hotels of Doha, but also because it's a different world now. So these Taliban want recognition. They want recognition not just from some in the Islamic world, but they want recognition from the Western world, China, Russia, particularly the Western world. And you can see Maulvi Baradar has had meetings with the CIA chief, Bill Burns. He's been having conversations with General McKenzie, the US commander there. In fact, Washington Post, just late last night I saw it, morning Washington time, had a story which mentioned that he had a conversation with General McKenzie and said, look, we are happy to wait for a week before entering Kabul if you can ensure the security of Kabul, right? We are in no hurry to come in. And General McKenzie probably checked with Washington, but he was given the impression that President Biden was absolutely firm that US forces must withdraw from Kabul. So he said, all right, you come into Kabul and you secure Kabul, you just let us secure the Kabul airport, and we know what happened after that. So these Taliban, but the upshot is that these Taliban are speaking to Americans like they are friends and equals. Doesn't matter that they fought a war. That's how things happen in Afghanistan. There are blood feuds, but there are also these strange alliances. There is also plenty of forget and forgive, because Afghanistan, even blood feuds are not really about hatred of somebody or about carry forward feeling of revenge. Everything is about, nothing is about permanent enmities. Everything is about shifting vested interests and deal making, and that is what's happening right now. So Pakistan will have to deal with this Taliban, which is not happy just with Pakistan support. They want Western recognition. Tough questions for Pakistan. Now, Taliban at the same time will have to learn to deal with the new Afghanistan. Why a new Afghanistan? Because average age of India is 28 and a half years. That's very young. Look at Italy, 46 years. That's why they had such high fatalities from COVID, because COVID fatalities are very age related, right? India is very young, we say, 28 and a half years. Pakistan is even younger, 23 years. The countries that have been producing more babies lately happen to be younger. They produce more babies. They also have less survival rate, so people don't live till that long. That's why they have much more younger population. Afghanistan has an average age of 18, 1-8. That means a large number, a large majority of Afghans were born after 9/11. They haven't seen the Taliban rule. So for them now to get used to Taliban rule, a lot of them have got educated. A lot of the elites are leaving, but all the others, all the elites can't leave. And all the others now have mobile phones, right? More than 80%, 90% of Afghanistan's population now has mobile phones. In fact, tens of millions of them now already have smartphones. Maybe about 15 million or more have smartphones. So they know दुनिया में क्या हो रहा है. They know what's going on in the world. They know the world can not go back to what it was before September 2001. That is not going to happen. So Taliban will have to deal with this new Afghanistan. Next question, Taliban will have to learn to deal with the new Pakistan. New Pakistan, not in the sense that Imran Khan promises a Naya Pakistan, but in the sense that Pakistan today is not stronger than 1996. Pakistan today is even weaker than 1996. Economically, it has the sword of FATF hanging over its head. Also, while India's economy, etc., may have stalled over the past couple of years, but the fact is that between 96 and today, 2021, that is 25 years, India's economy has left Pakistan far, far, far behind. So has India left Pakistan behind in terms of global interest, also in terms of ties with the Americans and ties with the Western powers. in membership of the Quad. Plus, India now has leverage, and that leverage is with the Americans that you can't have the Quad on one side and have Pakistan as your stalwart ally on the other, unless some issues are settled. So once again, I will not go further into that. That may be the national interest someday. But Pakistan, it's not the same Pakistan as 1996. So the Taliban will have to figure this out, because this is not a Pakistan that can keep the Taliban going for 5 years by itself with Saudi money, Saudi and UAE money, as they did between 1996 and 2001. This Pakistan cannot do it. Next point, the US will have to choose again. And what is the choice? Do you go back to 1999? Which means if these proliferations again come up, jihadi proliferations in Afghanistan, and people see it as no man's land, and so groups from all over come in here, because since 1996 or since 2001, the other thing that's happened which is adverse to America's interest or Western interest or global interest also is the rise of ISIS. So ISIS rose, and ISIS is also Hydra-headed, you might want to call it, Bhasmasur. You cannot put it away, because you deny them territory, they still keep coming up. People who came up in Sri Lanka and bombed those hotels, they just declared themselves ISIS and learned this on internet. So ISIS is now a big problem. So if ISIS again starts finding refuge, or groups like that again start finding refuge in Afghanistan, and Afghan government says, look, we are trying, but we can do nothing. We'll give you information. You can send drones. Drones can kill them. Occasionally, or maybe more often than occasionally, drones will come and kill a family of 10 in a car, 8 of whom will be children, which is precisely what happened in Kabul yesterday. In fact, youngest child out of these was 2 years old, and I think if you can source some pictures, we'll show you some pictures. It's terrible. It's terrible. It is not collateral damage. It is colossal incompetence, unless it is something to which the Taliban have deliberately led the Americans to further rub their noses into the ground. So America will have to see how do they deal with this new AfPak region. Do they go back to 1999? That means fighting these groups here. Then they'll have to have Pakistan as their ally, because otherwise they cannot do it. Drones can't keep flying from Qatar. In fact, I still doubt if any drone is flying from Qatar right now. Some drones can ostensibly fly or theoretically fly 40 hours plus, but at 40 hours plus, what kind of ordnance can it carry? I don't know. It's not very clear even on internet and even talking to experts. And second thing is, when you think that some terror threat is happening, that somebody is carrying out an attack, you cannot start a drone from Qatar that will take 16 hours reaching there, right? That's too long. You have to have something closer. So that closer will have to be Pakistan, Tajikistan, Uzbekistan, places like that. And Uzbekistan, Tajikistan will do nothing that the Russians don't want them to do. So once again, if they again become reliant on Pakistan, they will see consequences for their larger foreign policy interests. So they'll have to see how to deal with this. Next, Qatar now emerges as the most important power center of the Middle East. And look at how clever that country is. That country has produced a spectacularly independent TV channel or media group, that is Al Jazeera, but spectacularly independent as long as it's not covering Qatar. Right? Nothing about Qatar. They are very independent about covering any other country. So this is an incredible export by the oil-rich Sheikhdom of Qatar. The other thing they are doing, while they are hosting the Taliban in Doha, at the same time they are hosting the largest American airbase in the region, which is also a harbor for America's longest range drones and also the control center for their drones. So you have to be very smart and frankly enormously rich to be able to afford such luxuries. But we don't ask Qataris those questions. The answers stare us in the face every time Qatari sprinters, runners get so many medals in Asian Games, because you know that most of these runners have been imported from Africa. They are not even they are not even Asian or definitely not Qatar born. So Qatar has the money, plus they are also smart. Other countries also have the money, but they are not as smart as Qataris are. So now they will become a power center of the Middle East. Next, rise of Turkey. Turkey is now rising as a very interesting power in the region. They are a NATO member. They are repairing their relationship with the Americans, but at the same time making it more transactional. Now, if they come into Kabul to protect and run Kabul airport, which is a negotiation that's going on, that will be done between them and the Qataris. Then one, it's a message to Saudis and the other Gulf countries that Qataris and Turks, both of which whom they didn't like that much all these years, have now stolen a march over them in Afghanistan in an area that America wants secured. So that's a big change there. But remember, just in the subcontinent, the Turks, if this happens with Kabul airport and Turks come in, Turks will have boots on the ground for the first time. These will be the first Turk boots on the ground after several centuries. And we know that from the Ottoman history and after, Turkey has always had the ability, the diplomatic and strategic ability to punch above its weight. So Turkey's entrance into the subcontinent is something that we need to be watched. That's why it's number 8 on our 10 most important points arising from this change. Next, 9th, the role of the stans will change. That is Tajikistan, Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan, all three border Afghanistan, and then further Kyrgyzstan, etc. Now, role will change. There will be pressure on them from the Americans and others to help with operations if needed, but there will also be pressure from the Russians, because Russians now don't want anything leaking into these stans, because from there it will leak into Russia, and Russia has had problems with its Muslim minority. Similarly, the stans will be under pressure from the Chinese on the other side, because they also don't want any of this contagion going into China. So I think some of these stans will benefit from it, because they'll now have some bargaining power, and they will say, look, the fire truck is gone. They can tell the Americans, tell the Russians, fire truck was the Americans. कि आग लगेगी अफगानिस्तान में तो अमेरिकन बुझा रहे थे. They were putting it out. Now the American fire truck is gone. We are all that stands between you and this kind of radical Islam, right? So they have leverage with Russia. They also have leverage with China. So their position has changed. And finally, China will have to find a new view on the region, because it's very easy to say that the Chinese are celebrating America's defeat. They are, but that is global times and all. That is like trolling, right? Countries don't become big powers because they have a trolling mindset. Countries become big powers because they act in their own self-interest. So how will the Chinese see their own self-interest in this situation? Will they see better value in making an alliance with the Pakistanis, relying on the Pakistanis to be able to control Afghanistan with Pakistan's help and carry on like that? Or might they see more value in maybe having better communication between them and the Americans, and to say, look guys, there is honor among thieves, you suffered here, we have no intention to burn our fingers here, let's talk, let's not be adversaries, let's not fight our Cold War in Afghanistan, because then nobody really wins. Because remember, the last Cold War that was fought beginning in 1979, the Soviets lost and got destroyed. So one superpower that fought the Cold War lost in 1989, 10 years after the war. The second superpower that won that war has now lost, that is 32 years after the last Cold War. So that is why I would say that watch the Chinese also very closely, because Chinese act in self-interest. Chinese don't act in emotion. Please do not go by Global Times and some tweets by some Chinese spokesman and others.